Hey fairy friends, Matrain here, and today I want to talk through my logic when building a deck I call Sharra's Embrace, then show you the very first game I played with it, so we can reflect together on any misplays, strengths, or weaknesses of the deck. Now I never see Shara played, even though her ability... Wait, wrong Shara. Okay, there we go. So I never see Shara played, and wanted to find fun and surprising way to leverage her ability to the fullest, while still having a deck strong enough to win even if I never draw her. So, let's build our deck. Alright, we know we want to play Shara, so we'll start by including the Dragon Slayer herself, and Time of Legends for an increased likelihood that we'll draw her. Now we want to build around her unique ability that lets her ignore all damage equal to 4 or more. I want Shara to stick around long enough to use that ability, so I want to buff her 3 health out of range of Flame Burst, Bomb Slinger, Wind Soldier, or Ninja Toad as soon as possible. Depending on the opposing deck, I'd even be reluctant to drop her without a buff in the same turn. Like any other legendary, she's still susceptible to Frogify and Last Nightmare, but we should be able to see those coming and adjust our strategy accordingly. So, for the best buffs in town, we'll turn to green, going with an all-in buff strategy. That means Ruden's Guidance, Elderwood Embrace, Tiki Caretaker, and even Shamanic Dance, so we can lock down creatures facing Shara and delay advancing lands. I also want to jump over to neutral and add in Outland Ranger for the cheap campfires we'll get from their gift ability. Now here's the fun part, friends. These buffs won't always be for our creatures. If we have Mighty Shara on board, we can buff enemy creatures so their attack is over 4. I'm thinking specifically of cards I see all the time: Shed and Brute, Grimguard, Queensguard, Water Elemental, and Oradrim Fanatic. If we pre-buff Shara, then slightly buff any of these creatures, Shara can wipe them off the board without taking any damage. It's risky, sure, but that is where we'll have the most fun with this deck. Alright, so with this many buffs, and the fact that Shara costs 7 Faria, we're not a rush deck, and I don't think Shara will fare well in a land ramp mirror match, since she'll likely be overtaken by water elementals, frog tossers, or sky whales. So I think we'll build up one side of the board, probably into the wells for double collection, then burst into face with double neutral lands. And since we'll be advancing with neutral lands, let's add some solid neutral cards that are reliable even without Shara. We'll start with Mace Man, Waryak, and Steamforged Enforcer. Now I'm choosing these creatures with high attack to play around Choking Sand, which I've seen a lot of lately. I also want to shut down any early opposing wood or water elementals that could cause trouble for Shara. Now 4 cards left, so we'll add one more creature that I really enjoy playing and has great synergy with the buff strategy, Unlikely Hero. You can check this card out in another one of my deck overview videos called Unlikely Dancing Glider Rush. It's a lot of fun to pull off. So, our last card. Let's reflect on our balance to this point. We have full sets of 6 creatures, plus Shara and her related card, Time of Legends. We also have 3 full sets of green buffs. Let's add one more green buff, and we'll make it a fun one that I never see played, Gaia's Grace. We want our creatures to stick to the board with all these buffs, and that orb heal of +3 could actually help us out if we're facing rush or burn. Now before we hop into a match, what's our ideal starting hand? I'm thinking Outland Ranger as a great turn 1 play, since we'll get that campfire early on too. Mace Man is reliable too, if we start with Explore. And how about Shara? Because she's the real queen of this deck and we want to play her, that's the whole point. Alright, now let's review my first game with Shara's Embrace. Alright, so this is my first time playing. I went with Shara, obviously, to keep her. Ruden's Guidance and Gaia's Grace. I think I should have tossed those back and gone for a neutral creature. Now, I'm thinking of neutrals right here, and in retrospect, I think that was a mistake. I think I should have placed a single forest right in the middle, so that I can react to my opponent. Since I didn't have any neutral creatures to drop at that turn, it seemed kind of a waste that I dropped those neutral lands. Alright, so this is, kind of proving that I probably should have gone straight in the middle with that forest. Because I don't have any, at this point I'm considering, do I drop, I need 2 forests before I can get any of my buffs off. I want to keep advancing, but if he's playing red, he's going to have that combat advantage over me. And the burn. I mean, dropping Unlikely Hero here was a risky play because he can drop not only... So he went with a Lake, an Ancient Herald, which is still a strong play. So right now we know that he has a type of blue-red bargain deck. Alright, so we picked up a Mace Man. We also have Shara. And Shara is effective against this Ancient Herald. But I'm toying with the idea of... I think I have to get my first forest down so that I can have the flexibility to buff later on. So I think I'll drop that there. What I'm considering now, I recall, is do I collect there with Unlikely Hero and essentially sacrifice it to the Ancient Herald and then drop Shara? But I'm reluctant to drop Shara this early on, just because I don't have a buff on her yet. And I feel like, I remember thinking that she's just still too far away from face, and I wanted her to pressure face. But then I recall, the real value from Shara is in taking out creatures, and them not being able to fight back. So I do end up dropping her there. This does put us in a spot where our opponent can, kind of land block us by putting another mountain right below his Ancient Herald. Looking at our hand, we have 2 great buffs in hand. So if he doesn't remove Shara with a Flame Burst, we will probably get a buff down on her next turn. But our opponent has 6 Faria. I'm guessing he's going to drop a mountain just to get some an aggressive creature down. I remember at this point I was really nervous that was a Bomb Slinger, but I think Bomb Slinger is 3 mountains. And I don't think it's typically run in blue-red bargain decks, so that was a relief. Alright, now we have Shara in double collection. The Shed and Brute can take her out, but this is why we are running buffs. Alright, so the Ancient Herald can collect next turn if we don't take care of it, but the Shed and Brute can clear us. So we're definitely going to buff Shara. It's just, we have 3 options in hand. What's the best way to take that creature out? That's what we're considering. So here I went with that sneaky play I was talking about earlier, where we're buffing an opposing creature, the Shed and Brute in this case, also buffing Shara, and that just feels so good. Taking out a Shed and Brute, we buffed ourselves, and not taking any damage at all. So now that Ancient Herald is also susceptible to Shara. Moving back, dropping Water Elemental, which is a great call too. Our opponent getting that blue-red land ramp down. But here, we have yet another opportunity to take advantage of this fun buff strategy on our enemies so that Shara can maintain her momentum. So right now I remember thinking I need to get some aggressive lands before, since we are landlocked right now. So I do want to drop 2 neutrals, get closer to face, and I want to throw my opponent off in the sense that I want them to be torn between which side of the board they need to place their creatures on. If I can place a creature over on the top left side, that's right. So right here, I'm considering taking out that creature and then having to buff Shara again. But the route I decided to go with is placing that creature with the Outland Ranger with forward momentum on the upper left, and buffing the Water Elemental so I can get another perfectly clean value trade, or if you call it that, on the Water Elemental. So that feels great. We took out a Shed Brute. We forced the Ancient Herald to not collect next turn because it's going to be wiped out by Shara. And I don't mind that the Outland Ranger went down because it's pushing our opponent back into the middle and away from the wells. We can move our next turn. We can move our Tiki Caretaker up 1. We can move Shara up into collection on that lake and start setting down. We have all the forests we need. We don't have any green creatures, so we don't need any more forests. I think we'll just go with double neutrals, depending on what our opponent does, up in the top right. Or maybe even off to the left, so we can drop a Mace Man. So our opponent comes down with the Grimguard. And Shara is out of reach of either one of these. I did consider running Silent Horsemaster for a moment, but it requires 3 wildlands, and we only need 2, so I felt that was a waste, especially since we want to double neutrals off him if we can. I dropped the Mace Man there to further divide my opponent. Which side does he want to take? There are threats coming in from both angles. The Tiki Caretaker, the question is, do I have it go down this turn? Should I buff? I have so many buffs in my deck that first time I'm playing this, I'm really considering, what's my best angle here? I decide to go with the Mace Man so that I can maintain the buff on the Mace Man so that the Ancient Herald shouldn't be able to clear it. And I can keep that collection for next turn. So our opponent's getting aggressive here, that Mystic Beast, and I'm fine with that. I'm actually delighted to see it. Our opponent is up to 6 lands. And a lot of the major threats in this kind of a deck, I think, will have creatures with attack over, a 4 or more. So I dropped the Tiki Caretaker there so that I have 2 threats on board. If our opponent has Frogify, they have to decide now which one of these 2 threats do they take care of. I think Tiki Caretaker is in a great spot right there for double collection. When you're running Shara, you don't want, you have an all-in buff strategy that supports Shara, but you don't want to throw everything on her, because she could be wiped out by a Frogify or a Last Nightmare, and then you're really set back. So I did go for the buffs on the Mace Man to force difficult decisions for my opponent. The Grimguard can't do much in that central spot. At this point, we have lethal on board, so the Mystic Beast down there can't really advance to face. see another Grimguard. And the Mystic Beast coming back into, so setting up the defense, realizing that we have a lot of pressure. Right now, though, we just picked up that Steamforge Enforcer to keep the pressure on. We can collect with that Caretaker. We can even +1, which I think is what we'll do. And we can clear that Grimguard right there with our Mace Man. And I don't think it's worth engaging that Grimguard right there. We just want to apply the pressure. So we still have lethal on board. Our opponent can't really deal with this, with both of these threats on each side of the orb. And we have a really solid card coming down because we set up in double collection with that Tiki Caretaker. We have the Feria advantage to drop that Steamforge Enforcer. I also want to buff that Mace Man. So we have 3 major threats our opponent has to deal with. And you'll notice there with the Gaia's Grace, that 1 tech card we have, we gained back some of that burned damage to face earlier. So if our opponent was rushing us, or and we were pretty low, that might have been enough to save us. So at this point, all 3 of... Alright, our opponent goes for Hellfire, but it's 9 damage split across those 3 really bulky creatures. There's not much that can happen there. So right now we have another great buff in hand for any one of these creatures if we wanted, but we do have lethal on board. We're not going to play around, and we're going to finish off our first match, Shara's Embrace, with Shara herself. That's all for today, friends. I really hope you found this video helpful. I'm no expert, but I do think it's great when we share our thought processes in deck building and gameplay. If you have any thoughts on improving this deck, or if you noticed anything in the gameplay that I missed, please feel free to let me know with a comment. Also, feel free to check out some of my other content here on the channel. Until next time, fairy friends, take care, good luck, and have fun.